You're listening to the Leaping Choya podcast recorded in the Wrong Mountain Yurt in the Sonoran Desert.
I am falling away from this world. I am falling away from this world. You are calling me.
Okay, we're rolling. Leaping Choya podcast. We're reading Contributions to Philosophy of the Event by Martin Heidegger, and we're on section 42.
Okay.
Go ahead.
42. From being and time to event. On this, quote, way, if to keep falling down and getting up can be called a way, it is always and only the same question of the, quote, meaning of beyng, end quote, that is asked. Therefore, the positions of the questioning are constantly different. Every essential questioning must radically change whenever it questions more originally. There is no gradual, quote, development here. Even less is there that relation of the latter to the earlier, according to which the latter would already lie enclosed in the earlier. Since everything in the thinking of beyng is directed toward the unique, to fall down is, as it were, the norm here. This also rules out the historiological procedure, to renounce the earlier as, quote, false, or to prove that the latter was, quote, already meant, end quote, in the earlier. The, quote, changes are so essential that their scale can be determined only if, in each case, the one question is pervasively asked out of its own site of questioning.
Yeah, so late, we're going to say later. Even less is there that relation of the later to the earlier. I don't think latter. Just to make that clear. On this way. This way is the way of what? The way of questioning. The way of...
The way from being in time to event, maybe.
Yep. The way of going from being in time to event. Being in time, of course, is the name of his earlier book. So in a sense, this way of going from what I talked about in my earlier book to this book. And the essential thing is the question of the meaning of beyng. It's a good question. But what is this thing about falling down and getting up? If falling down and getting up can be called a way. The positions of the questioning are constantly different. So it's not about building a scaffolding of questions or a system of questions or a preferential sequence of questionings. The positions of the questionings are always different. Every essential questioning must radically change whenever it questions more originally. So we have a different kind of questioning here. It's not a gradual scientific inquiry. It's a radical, original questioning that is always changing positions. There's no gradual development here. Even less is there that relation of the later to the earlier, according to which the later would lie already enclosed in the earlier. So again, there's this. It's not a closed sequence. Since everything in the thinking of beyng is directed toward the unique, to fall down is, as it were, the norm here. So we're always falling down into the unique, we're always lunging, we're always leaping, we're always crashing down into something unique, something new. It's not procedural, it's not scientific. This also rules out the historiological procedure. So the historiological procedure is what? To renounce the earlier as false, or to prove that the later was already meant in the earlier. So historiology is, again, history as story, or story as history, or no history at all and just lots of story. And in this procedure, he says, what is done is that the earlier is renounced as false. So the past is called false or immoral or not what we thought it was. and then you go about proving that what came later was already meant in the earlier. So it's this kind of, again, closed system of meaning that serves the interrogator much more than it serves the truth. The changes are so essential that their scale can be determined only if in each case the one question is pervasively asked out of its own site of questioning. So these changes, the changes that are going to occur through this questioning, and the changes from one position to the other, from as the questioning lunges from one place to another, is so essential. The scale of these changes can be determined only if in each case the one question is pervasively asked out of its own site of questioning. The one question, I'm not quite sure what that is. Might be the question of the meaning of beyng, or might just be the question that is being asked. But each question must be asked out of its own site of questioning. Questions are not loyal to each other. They're not subservient to each other. There's no hierarchy of questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So he's describing the process of questioning here, and it's rather radical, extreme, different than science. I call it I don't know, meditational or just adventurous.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like this idea of the later was already meant in the earlier is like a really common thing that, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking politicians or writers like to try to justify, to be like, well, I've come up with new stuff, but it was actually there in the earlier. Like that just feels like a very familiar way to.
Really? Because when I heard that, I thought, yeah, I didn't feel a flood of examples of that. So can you like what? Talk more about it.
Well, I guess I was thinking, just like in the recent political election, like a lot of people being like, oh, well, I've always voted this way, basically. So this idea that the earlier feeds into the later, or maybe even, I don't know, maybe, I don't, it, I guess what it feels like a sort of, not necessarily excuse, but in a way to, I guess, excuse earlier. So maybe also it's like, well, maybe I didn't vote about it then, but I always had this value, and that value, you know, was this, but things have changed. So like, just like, I guess the reasoning that's given to be like, basically, I was always a good person.
Yeah, the kind
Even
of consistency of moralism and
yeah, that's what it. Like to say it was what was latter. So I guess I feel like the idea is that like earlier I forgot to say, let's say earlier, I never said this one thing that I should have said, and then later I did eventually get to it. But then you could say, well, what I said earlier like implied what was in the later.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of there. I just hadn't said it yet. So it feels like a reasoning or a justification or a way to be like, I didn't really change positions. It was always there. I was just developing and advancing, which in theory seems like, you know, a cool thing to develop and advance. And that kind of is like a nice idea to be like the earlier was in the later. But so it's interesting that he's like, that's just historiological. It's just kind
that's
of
right.
boring
It's
or something.
just telling a story about yourself over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Keep reading.
Yeah. The quote changes, though, are not conditioned from the outside by objections. For up to now, no objection has become possible, since the question is still not grasped at all. The quote changes arise from the widening abyss of the question of beyng itself, whereby every historiological support is withdrawn from this question. As a result, the way itself certainly becomes ever more existential, not as personal.
Ever more essential.
As a result, the way itself certainly becomes ever more essential, not as, quote, personal development, end quote, but as the human exertion, in a completely non-biographical sense, to bring beyng itself to its truth in beings.
Yeah, that seems pretty clear. Yeah, I think he keeps using this idea of the changes. I want to see where that idea is rooted in. Because where does he first use that word change in this section? Every essential questioning must radically change whenever it questions more originally. So this change is from question to question, how the questions change from one to the other. And
Where is that?
It's in the it's like the third sentence of this section. Every essential questioning must radically change.
Yeah, but that change doesn't have quotes. And then later he has a change with quotes.
Yeah, but he says the changes are so essential.
Oh, okay.
He seems to be referring to some other time that word was used.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like, I think he's saying that as we question more originally, the questions change. And these changes are not conditioned from the outside by objections. It's not that we change our questions because somebody objects to our questions. The changes arise from the widening abyss of the question of beyng itself, whereby every historiological support is withdrawn from this question. So the question of beyng, of the meaning of beyng, it has no support from historiology. It forever faces a widening abyss of question and what's being questioned. As a result of these radical changes between questions, the way itself certainly becomes ever more essential. Not so maintaining the way, staying on the way as the questions change, and in a sense have no story to them, have no connection. Staying on the way becomes ever more essential, not so you can engage in personal development, but as the simple human task of bringing beyng to its truth in beings. Yeah, so I think he's saying that because the questions will change so radically, one could lose a sense of the way. So there is a way that connects these questions. It's not a history or a story, but it's a way, and it's in a sense it's as he says, it's an exertion to bring beyng to its truth in beings. Yeah.
This is merely a repetition of something that since the end of the first beginning of Western philosophy, i.e., since the end of metaphysics, has to happen ever more decisively, namely the fact that the thinking of beyng must not become a, quote, doctrine or, quote, system. It must rather become genuine history and thus what is most concealed.
Yeah, he's touched on that before.
Yeah.
We can go on.
This occurs for the first time as Nietzsche's thinking, and what confronts us there as, quote, psychology, as self-dissection and dissolution and, quote, esse homo, end quote.
Yeah, I think it's ecce homo, behold the human.
Along with everything contemporary to that desolate time, has its genuine truth as the history of thinking. In Nietzsche, this thinking still first seeks what is to be thought and still finds it in the sphere of metaphysical questioning, will to power and eternal recurrence of the same.
Yeah, so this kind of original questioning occurs in Heidegger's view for the first time in Nietzsche. Nietzsche's self-dissection, Nietzsche's analysis of the human being, and Nietzsche's seeking after what is to be thought, what we should be thinking, and his metaphysical questioning. Yeah, all right.
That seems like a nod to Nietzsche, right? I mean, he's saying,
Oh yeah, Heidegger loves Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The attempts since Being and Time indeed pose the question more originally, but everything observes a more humble measure, provided comparatives are indeed possible here.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
The carrying out of the question of being does not admit of any imitation. Here, the necessities of the way are in each case historically first, because they are historically unique. Whether seen, quote, historiologically, they are, quote, new and, quote, peculiar, is here not a possible theme for a judgment. The historical domination of the history of Western thinking is becoming ever more essential, and the diffusion of, quote, historiological or, quote, systematic erudition in philosophy ever more impossible. For the task is not to bring to cognition new representations of beings, but rather to ground the being of the human being in the truth of beyng, and to prepare this grounding in the inventive thinking of beyng and of Dasein. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're questioning beyng. We're asking about the meaning of being. We're not engaged in historiology. The historical domination of the history of Western thinking is becoming ever more essential, and the diffusion of historiological and systematic erudition in philosophy ever more impossible. So, I mean, really, like, historiology and systematization in Western thinking is becoming impossible in the sense that it doesn't really hold up. It's not really productive. It doesn't work. It's a lie, as Heidegger believes. The task is not to bring to cognition new representations of beings. That would be what historiology and systematization try to do, is they just bring to thought new representations of beings. But the task is rather to ground the being of the human being in the truth of beyng, and to prepare this grounding in the inventive thinking of beyng and Dasein. So that's an alternative approach that he believes philosophy needs to take to just more representations of beings. And we're talking about beings without asking what their being is and what beyng is and how Dasein relates to them. Yeah. All right.
This preparation does not consist in the acquisition of preliminary cognitions, out of which the proper cognitions are then supposed to be inferred at a later time. Rather, preparation means here paving the way, compelling onto the way, in the essential sense, disposing. Then again, not as if what is thought and what is to be thought were merely an indifferent occasion for thought to move in some way or other. Indeed, the truth of beyng, the knowledge born of meditation, is everything.
Yeah. Instead, the truth of beyng, rather. So we need to figure out. He goes back to that term disposition. We need to be disposed. We need to be disposed to a true cognition, not as if what is thought and what is to be thought were merely an indifferent occasion for thought to move in some way or other. So it's not just a thought should not just be moving because it has a chance to move somewhere and fly all about and go from topic to topic. Instead, the truth of beyng, the knowledge born of meditation, is everything. That's Heidegger the Buddhist right there, really. You know, I mean, the knowledge born of meditation, which he calls the truth of beyng, is everything. Yeah.
Yet the way of this inventive thinking of beyng does not already have a fixed and plotted course on a map of the land. Indeed, the land only first comes to be through the way and is unknown and incalculable at every point along the way.
Yeah, we don't know the land that this inventive thinking is. Inventive thinking of beyng is moving around on. It's not that there's a prepared locale or landscape in which we're going to be moving. In fact, it's completely unknown and incalculable at every point along the way. So we shouldn't think that we're just mapping and gridding out something that's there. Inventive thinking, meditation, seeking the truth of beyng is more lunging about in the unknown and the incalculable. Like meditation, really. Yeah.
The more genuinely the way of inventive thinking is a way to beyng, the more unconditionally it is determined by beyng itself.
Yeah.
Inventive thinking does not mean thinking up or arbitrarily devising. Instead, it refers to that thinking which, in questioning, stands up to beyng and challenges beyng to attune the questioning through and through.
Yeah.
The inventive thinking of beyng must always put beings as a whole up for decision. That indeed succeeds each time in only one line of sight and turns out ever more poorly the more the intimation of beyng strikes home more originally. The land that comes to be through and as the way of the inventive thinking of beyng is the between which appropriates Dasein to the God. In this appropriation, the human being and God first become, quote, recognizable to each other in their belonging to the stewardship and neediness of beyng.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's very much, this whole section is very much about meditation. A lot of it really rings super true in terms of, in a sense, a German idealist exegesis on what meditation is. Inventive thinking, which is really a synonym for meditation. The more genuinely your meditation goes toward beyng, the more unconditionally will it be determined by beyng itself. That just reminds me of, the talk in meditation of, in a sense, absorption in the object, giving your mind over to the outside realm that you're meditating on, being appropriated and captivated by the other, by the external, by the mysterious. And inventive thinking doesn't mean thinking up or devising. Instead, it refers to that thinking which, in questioning, stands up to beyng and challenges beyng to attune the questioning through and through. So it says to beyng, please modify my questioning, attune my questioning, change my questioning, change my thinking. The inventive thinking of beyng must always put beings as a whole up for decision. Are there beings? What are they? How are they? Why are they? How do we decide about them? That indeed succeeds each time in only one line of sight and turns out ever more poorly the more the intimation of beyng strikes home more originally. Turns out that indeed succeeds each time in only one line of sight and turns out ever more poorly the more the intimation of beyng strikes home more originally. I think that what turns out ever more... Sorry?
Is it that beings turn out ever more
I think so.
poorly?
I think the inventive thinking of beyng must always put beings as a whole up for decision, meaning we must decide if they exist, in a sense, if they are true, if they are real, And the more the intimation of beyng strikes home more originally, the less they will be found to be true and real and decisive. The land that comes to be through and as the way of the inventive thinking of beyng is the between. So he's talked about the between before. This land where inventive thinking goes and thrives is called the between. It's between things. So it's between beings. That's where beyng exists. And it appropriates Dasein to the God. Now that's very yoga meditation. I mean, yoga is really about being appropriated by the God. Meditation, a lot of types of meditation are about giving your mind to the God and letting the God take your mind. It's the same words, same idea. In this appropriation, the human being and the God first become recognizable to each other in their belonging to the stewardship and neededness of beyng. The God and the human both need beyng, and they recognize each other in their role as caretakers of beyng. Very much the yogi sitting down to yoke their Atman to the Brahman here. It's exactly the same idea. We really smell Heidegger's kind of Buddhistic, yogistic approach in this section. It's lovely, really.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about this idea of, like you said, the absorption, the appropriation, how the self gets taken over by, like, I think you said, what did you say? The the other things in the world, I guess, but not beings, I don't think. What is it that we strive to be appropriated by or into? Yeah.
I mean, I think first off, there's a million kinds of meditation, and so I think there's the kind of meditation that meditates on a bird or a little statue or a mandala or a word. And these things would seem to qualify as beings. Then there's meditation that focuses on or gives mind to sort of more general ideas like nothingness, silence, the one, Om, the universe, a happy place, power, the higher power, energy, the outside, the other, the mystery. All these, again, qualify as beings. Then there's meditation, I would say, that is more meta-practitional. So you're, as opposed to having an object, you're actually trying to manipulate the foundation of your meditational capacity itself. So you're trying to be silent in yourself. You're trying to negate any image that emerges before you. You're trying to move backwards in your memory. you're trying to disappear. You're trying to have no thoughts. You're trying to simply observe the stream of thoughts that you're having. So you're trying to set up a kind of situational, external observer of your own rapid fire conscious movie theater. And then there's other kinds of meditation, but I would say even when you're focused on a being, say a statue or a word, or you're focused on a concept like stillness or silence or nothingness, or you're focused on a state of your own being like disappearing or not having any thoughts. You're not necessarily focused on these beings, be they objects, words, or concepts, as say a scientist is focused on them, or a journalist, or an engineer, or a buyer and seller. I think ideally meditation, when you're meditating on a statue, to meditate on it as a being is a little strange, because as a being, I would say it's kind of it's banal. If it's a little statue, then it's made of plastic and it's got ruby eyes and whatever, and it's a thing. But its beyng is what you're meditating on. So it's dynamism, it's essence, its aura, its spirit, its soul, its meaning, its history, its capacity to arouse affections and fantasies and imaginations in you. So the beyng is, in a sense, what you're always meditating on. Because in a way, you can't meditate on a being or an object. So you're always relating to the beyng of the thing you're meditating on, or you're always trying to become the beyng that is the meditator. And so what does that mean? Now, that's what I just went through is a little incomplete summary of what is essentially Buddhistic meditation. Now, yoga is completely different. And if you read the Yoga Sutras, what you learn is that the again, standard definition, yoga means yoking yourself to the universal self, becoming absorbed in the universal self, in a sense, the way sugar is absorbed in water. But that sort of yogic meditation, and yoga is in a sense just movement meditation or meditation through asana, is similar to the Buddhistic meditation of meditating on the Buddha, and seeking union with the Buddha. Again, in a sense, we can kind of only think of it metaphorically, the way sugar melts into water, or the way that wind moves through the air, or the way that plants receive life from the sun. Were you going to say something?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've always kind of thought of appropriation, and I know this is different than the meditation you're talking about. So I've always thought of Heidegger's appropriation sort of as like do it almost like a, let's say, a dance. You're dancing and you turn someone, and like that turn as like, or like lifting up a child. Like I've always seen it kind of as like a sweep or a dip or
Yeah.
like a enfolding, I guess.
Yeah. I like that. I mean,
Because that's different than sugar and water, right? I mean,
yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I was, I guess I gave like 3 metaphors for what that appropriation can be. And I think it can be in a sense, any kind of relationship, any kind of conjoining, any kind of union. I mean, there's the union. Yeah, there's a union where one holds another, one moves another, one dances with another. Yeah, totally. I mean, it seems that if you have the meditator and the meditated on, and there's an appropriation between them, then you're talking about some kind of relationship spawning up and being taken away, right? In a sense, like even what I said and what you said are all kind of a taken awayness, right? Being a transported, being relayed into something else, right?
yeah, right.
But I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's always a vibe of infusion. So like in your example of lifting up a child, right? So which is Dasein and which is beyng? Did you have a sense of that when you said it? That's not like a trick question or a trying to take a more profound view of it. Did you have a sense for which one was the appropriator and which one was the appropriated in that metaphor?
I guess I would imagine, I mean, not really, but as you say that, I guess I would imagine beyng being like the adult, the bigger thing.
Yeah, so
Because beyng kind of like sweeps up the...
Yeah, so it's the one that is active. It appropriates the child.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about that, I mean, the physical act of picking up is just, there's not much to it. It's just a physical act. It's an energetic, dynamic movement. But the infusion element is the parent infuses the child with flight, with a sense of being taken care of,
Yeah.
with a sense of being empowered, empowers the child, changes the child, transforms the child from a thing on the ground to a thing in the air,
And
right?
there's sort of a change in gravity, actually, in both examples I gave.
There's love in it.
Yeah.
The child is infused with all these connotations that come from being lifted up. And that's a very beautiful metaphor for, I think, what we're talking about here, where Dasein, so we have where Dasein, the God appropriates Dasein. In this appropriation, the human being and God first become recognizable to each other in their belonging to the stewardship and neededness of beyng. I mean, so it's and I think that so a being and a being, I think Heidegger would probably say, can, if you have two beings abandoned by being, then they can relate in a way that doesn't really have any being or any beyng in a way.
Right.
But it's the beyng between beings
Right.
that is that infusion, that is that appropriation, that is that change, that I think is the it's the fruition of meditation. It's the act of meditation. It's the process and the fruit of meditation. So I think that, for instance, why does Atman seek to yoke itself to Brahman? Well, because it is infused with Brahman when it does that. To be appropriated by Brahman, for Atman to be appropriated by Brahman is for Atman to grow more Brahmanesque, to grow more godly, to grow more powerful, to grow more vast, to grow more universal. Just like a child being picked up by an adult, all of a sudden the child is like as tall as the adult, and has the strength of elevation and flight and power. It's very similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in all of this, it helps. All this kind of chatter helps to continue to define the difference between beings and beyng. Beyng, in a sense, is the life of beings. The relatable dynamism of beings, the part of beings that can infuse us with things and appropriate us, whereas beings are kind of the dead, abstract stuff of thought. Which is why I think Heidegger uses that term between. Beyng is between beings. So if I am a being and the God I am seeking to be appropriated by is a being, the between of us is our beyng, the beyng
Right.
between us. And that is the land of meditation, the land that is unknown and uncalculable, that suffuses into and through us.
Can you have, sorry,
Yeah, I'm done.
can you have beyng between two beings that have been abandoned by being, or is there no beyng there?
I mean, beings that are abandoned by being don't not have being, right?
Yeah.
They have the being of being abandoned by being.
Right.
It's like nothing has being. Nothingness is beingness, because nothing has being, doesn't it? So, of course, yeah, totally. Being abandoned by being doesn't mean you don't have being. It just means the being you have is being abandoned by being.
So it's not beyng.
And no, it's not beyng.
I think that's what I asked, right? I don't remember now, but
I think you said,
But I-
can there be beyng between two beings abandoned by being?
yeah.
And I said yes, because those two beings that are abandoned by being have the being of being abandoned by being.
Right.
So they are beings.
Oh, I see.
And there is
okay.
beyng between beings.
Oh, okay. I see.
But when you say, what is their being, you say, well, their being is being abandoned by being.
Right, right. So what would the beyng of them be then, even if it's...
Well, beyng is never a thing
Yeah.
that you can say it is this from one situation to the
Right,
next. The
right,
beyng is the event.
yeah.
So it would be what it is based on whatever those two beings abandoned by being are.
Right.
And in fact, that's a great lesson here, that there's no abstract answer to that question.
Right.
There's no out of context answer to that question. There's no metaphysic to that question. In that answer, it's unanswerable.
Right.
The beyng that exists between two beings abandoned by being would be the beyng that exists between two beings abandoned by being, which is a tautology, and that's about all you could say about it.
Yeah, right.
Because you'd have to tell me what those two beings are abandoned by being, and yet I don't even think beyng is speakable in that way. Only being is speakable in that way, and it's always false.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess
one would have a hard time finding not beyng.
Yeah, right.
The only place I would say where not beyng exists is in being. But yet, I don't know if we can know or I don't know if we can know being without bang. So the being where there is no bang is not knowable to us because we actually know through bang. Truly know. We
Right.
falsely know being.
Right.
But that is just a form of bang. That false knowing is just a form of bang.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm thinking about it in terms of anxiety thoughts,
Yeah.
which feel very almost, I don't know, like classic beings abandoned by being, because they're like thoughts that are, if they're anxiety, then I feel like it's often like the, well, what if something, which is, I feel like immediately makes it abandoned by being, because it's not even like I want to or this is. It's like this, well, what if this could be? Or I don't know. They say like anxiety is often about the future, or worrying about the future, worrying about the present. So it feels like it has this sort of innate relationship to be. It feels like almost possibly by definition. I mean, I guess in a way all beings are perhaps beings abandoned by being in some way.
Yeah.
But something about this feels like a higher magnitude of a being abandoned by being, like these like thoughts that are, but you're right, they do still carry beyng, like they do still have power and like energy around them. But like you said, it can be kind of like a false, or it could be like I guess an anxiety energy, which doesn't really feel in a way like a real energy, I guess. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to tell me what an anxiety thought is. Is it just an imagining of something that might happen?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, but I can sit here and imagine
that I don't want to happen. Let's say.
Well, okay, but I drive all the time, right, down the road, right? And
Yeah.
somebody could cross the line,
Right.
and it'd be a big mess.
Well,
I can imagine that happening.
right.
Then and I do often. I mean, I'm driving and I'm like, damn, I hope everybody's got their head on straight, man.
Yeah.
So where's the anxiety thought in that? What is an anxiety thought relative to all the many possible terrible outcomes that exist in our world?
I think I think it would be like if you were to, like you just said, I hope everyone has their head on straight. That's sort of like, it doesn't sound like you sit there and are like, oh my gosh, I'm really worried that someone might do this, and like kind of, I guess, cycle on it, or worry constantly that you might do it or that someone else might do it. Like it feels like a different
So I
weight of
think
the worry.
about it, but I don't think very much about it, and then I just kind of bury it and move on. So it's the same kind. It's the same.
Yeah,
I have the
perhaps.
same thought you have, but I have it once and you have it 100 times. And
Well, and you don't seem, I don't know, you don't seem super worried about it. I
okay,
guess.
good. So then what? I guess that's why I asked.
Degree of
So an
worry.
anxiety thought. So I have anxiety thoughts,
Right.
and you have anxiety thoughts, or maybe it's not correct to say there's such a thing as an anxiety thought, because it sounds like you and I have the same thought.
Right.
Let's say you are very
Right.
scared of people crossing the line,
Yeah.
and we both know that people can cross the line, and we both think The exact same thought. Wouldn't it be terrible if someone crossed the line?
Yeah, right.
We have the same thought,
Right.
but my thought, I don't know, is not attended by anxiety. Doesn't cause anxiety, but it kind of does. It causes a little bit, but maybe not as much as yours. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
I think that's right.
I'm trying to parse all this out to see
Yeah.
what the difference is.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Because I mean, it makes sense to be anxious about that,
Yeah.
and the fact that I'm not anxious about that, I mean, that's actually doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't know about that, but you can't sit there being anxious about everything that's possible. Because if you
Okay.
really get into that, then you know, if you really sit there and worry about every bad thing that could happen, that's just not practical. It's not really a good way to live.
All right, so let's go back then. So you said kind of, it seemed like you were saying that anxiety exhibits the epitome of being abandoned by being because your thoughts have no being. They're just hypothetical fear projections.
Yeah, I didn't say they have no being, because you're right. Nothing can really be without being, right?
Right.
But they're abandoned by being.
Okay. But all hypothetical thinking
Yes.
has the same quality of kind of being abandoned by being.
Yeah.
In a sense.
It's funny. It actually makes me think that, like, in a way, that's like what manifestation is, but you just frame it with a positive thought. You're like, I want to get $1 million. And if I keep repeating on that thought, it can happen, basically.
Right. So manifestation
It's
is
almost the
anxiety with
inverse.
like rosy glasses
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. But like, I don't.
It's like
well,
the inverse of anxiety. It's the exact
It's
same
a desire,
thing.
but it's desired. But there is like that repetition element, I think.
Yes.
And like kind of obviously magical thinking. And
Yeah.
anyway, sorry, where were you going?
I don't know. I mean, I think,
So, right. What I was thinking is that there's like a negative weight to it, right? I
There's a
guess.
what?
With anxiety, I feel like there's a negative weight. Typically, it's focusing on a bad thing happen, right? Not a good thing. And it repeats. So is that
manifestation
a being
is just like positive weight,
Yeah, I guess so.
positive
Yeah.
repetition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
so.
Yeah, go on.
Well, so I don't know. Does that make it? What was it? The question is it a being abandoned by being?
Yeah, I mean, what is a being abandoned by being? We use that phrase all the time. I'm not sure we know what it means. I mean, in a sense, I think we've been using it as... So, I think there's a couple ways. I think one is that it's a being, it's a thought that has no basis in reality. That's in
right.
a way one way we're using it.
Right.
But I bet Heidegger is not using it that way.
Yeah.
I think the way Heidegger's using it is that there are beings in our world, everything that we see and smell and taste and fear and think and whatever, and but we have not asked ourselves, or we don't relate to them in a way. We don't relate to them as having being. We haven't asked the question of their being. We haven't asked what they are in their beingness. We just relate to them as objects, as static, timeless, and often story-soaked objects. But their being, how they really are, is something that is lost to us. So in a sense, they've become just, again, objects of utility or objects of experience, objects of sensation without any real, in a sense, a basis in reality or basis in time or basis in being. So it's a little more, I would say, about how we relate to beings. So, I think with anxiety, clearly, anxiety thoughts. See, it's like that's why I asked about anxiety thoughts, because, again, that someone would go over the line does have a basis in reality. Somebody might go over the line. In fact, people do go over the line. You know, it's not a ridiculous thought. But I think in the Heideggerian sense, where the being abandoned by being comes in, especially related to anxiety, is that anxiety vis-a-vis that anxious thought. I don't think it's fair to call the thought anxious. It's not an anxiety thought. It's a thought. Anxiety is then triggered by the thought, or applied to the thought, or surrounds the thought, or emanates from the thought. But I would say that anxiety can only emanate from the thought and arise from the thought and multiply around the thought if the thought is a being abandoned by being, in the Heideggerian sense, which is that people might go over the line. That's a thought. There's being. That thought has being, but it's abandoned by being, in the sense that our relation to that thought, or the way we handle that thought, is without being. Meaning, we are not fully, we're not fully engaged with the being of that thought, and the being of that thought is this. Again, it's about time. It's about true history. It's about the true span of reality that lingers about a thought, or that a thought makes possible. And so the fact, let's just look at people going over the line. People don't go over the line that often. You can mitigate the problem of people going over the line pretty heavily by always watching and making sure they don't go over the line. And if they start to go over the line, you're ready and you move to the right. Right? You can go slower. You can drive a big truck. You can wear your seatbelt. You can stay farther to the right and not stay right up on the line. So if they go a foot over the line, they hit you. You can be far to the right. There's all kinds of things. And there's conditions in which people go over the line more often. There's maybe early signs that someone's going over the line. Maybe they're swerving. And you need to be aware of it. So there's all these parameters around that, around the being of that being. But if you're not relating to that being of that being, and in fact you're only relating to a being abandoned by being, anxiety is going to emerge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
So when we hear this phrase,
one more time,
when we hear this phrase, being abandoned by being,
Yeah.
we need to realize that it's not that anxiety thoughts are being abandoned by being. It's that thoughts whose being we have not, in a sense, analyzed or discovered the meaning of, are the ones that cause anxiety. And so if we, so in a sense, it's simple to describe it this way: having thoughts that are beings abandoned by being is directly related to anxiety. So the more your thoughts are beings abandoned by being, the more anxiety you will have. So the less you engage with the being of your thoughts, the more anxiety you will have. Which is another way of saying, the more identity you have, the more story you have, the more unanalyzed thoughts you have, the more anxiety you're going to have. Because the beings of your mind, which are your thoughts, do not have any being in the other sense of the word, which is you have not looked at them in time, and you have not thought them through. You are simply holding on to them as objects, as simple beings, as unanalyzed concepts, and that is going to cause anxiety.
Yeah, that makes sense. So did you say true being or just not abandoned by being?
Did I say what?
Sorry, what was the, like you said that if you can relate to your thoughts in their actual being, not actual, it's the wrong word. I don't know, in their real being and not get caught up in the being abandoned by being.
I mean, in a sense, if you can relate to their bang.
Yeah, right.
Being that is not abandoned by being, or the being that has had its being returned to it, is being based in bang.
Right. Yeah.
So again, the thoughts are not anxious thoughts. The better way to describe it is to say anxiety is the result of thoughts that are abandoned by being.
Yeah.
Which is another way of saying anxiety is the result of story. Anxiety is the result of identity. Anxiety is the result of machination. Anxiety is the result of unthought through thoughts. Anxiety is the result of being abandoned by being.
Yeah.
Anxiety is the result of metaphysics.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. That's a good distinction.
Anxiety is the result of the first beginning.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah.
Which is why in Heidegger's book there lie, in my view, certainly the most compelling clues for living an anxiety-free life. As much as Heidegger was one of the first thinkers to talk about the universality of anxiety. That anxiety is the human condition.
I think it's a different definition of anxiety.
It's a different kind of anxiety, I think. Yeah, that's right. But I would also say that I think I think it's hard to say whether he made that assessment as a description of the human mind in the throes of the first beginning, and that his other thinking in terms of the other beginning and the search for bang is seen as a curative of that. I think it's very possible that that's the case.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look at now with this new, this new perspective we have, to look at his writing on anxiety, because maybe he says that.
Yeah. I mean, my sense, the way I read it is my sense that the interplay of the resonating that brings about the leap, whereby, you encounter the last God and become the future ones. That feels to me like that feels like a novel called Escape from Anxiety.
Yeah. How so? Tell me more.
Huh?
Tell me more. How?
I don't know how there could be anxiety. I don't know how there could be anxiety in the in this, what did he call it? He called it a conjunction, the conjunction of these factors. The falling and the rising, the questions that change position every time, the more they get more original, the inventive thinking, the meditation, the encountering the last God, the recognizing the last God in the neededness of beyng, the the appropriation by beyng, the as he says, standing up to beyng and challenging beyng to change the question.
Yeah.
All of this feels like a new relationship with death. And what Heidegger says is anxiety is the human condition because humans die. And the nothingness of death naturally generates anxiety. But I think that in this beyng stuff he's talking about, and in this inventive thinking, and this quest for beyng, and this I don't know what the word for it is, but this odyssey to beyng. It's so much leaping and falling and questioning and going and diving and asking and challenging and seeking and standing up to and being appropriated and like meditating and disappearing and absolving and dissolving. It's a whole new...
Well,
yeah, in a sense, it's like the dance with death.
Yeah.
It's like dancing with death. Instead of fearing death and being anxious about death, it's like dancing with death.
And I mean, it also,
Or it's going beyond death. Go ahead.
well, as I say, it also seems like a new relationship, not just to death, but to meditation, to thought. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's a whole new way of human being. It's called Dasein, appropriated by beyng, and it's. I just don't know where death fits in there. I mean,
Well, I think you said that beyng is the ultimate death, or death is the ultimate. I don't know. There's some relationship there. I think he says something similar to that too.
and beyng is the ultimate death in the sense that beyng is the death of death. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Beyng is real death. And we always talk about death, but you know what? Death dies too. Everything dies, even death. So where does death die? Death dies in beyng and of beyng. And I think we know that. And we go to beyng, in a sense, to convene with death and say, I too die, you die, I too die like you, and you too die like me. And in that, in death dying, there is life. And death becomes nothing because death is dead. And you die with death. But if death dies, death dying means life.
Right.
And that's all really about history, and that's all really about non-identity, and that's really all about the end of story. Story is death. But when death dies, there is life, and the story ends, and then the story can finally begin.
Yeah. That's nice. That's beautiful.
And so when death dies, you don't have anxiety anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no death to cause make you anxious.
Right.
So I don't think Heidegger uses those terms, but I think there's something in beyng that there's something there.
Right.
In beyng, Which is, in another way of saying God. I mean, God is death dead.
Right.
God triumphs over death.
Right.
So God alone rises above death.
Right.
That's why it's God. So we try to convene with God to get away from death. God is victorious over death. God is the end of death. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Thanks for joining us for the Leaping Choya podcast. For more information, visit leapingchoya.com and be sure and follow us on socials. Until next time.